VUCA is an acronym. It actually came out of the military. It means, it's VUCA. V is for volatile. U is for uncertainty, C is complexity, and ambiguity. So this really, the idea is how to look at the environment. So a couple of things that I tell my younger students. First and foremost is courage. As a project manager, I can teach you all the tools, how to do a schedule, blah blah blah, how to do a budget, how to monitor and control, read metrics, right? But you have to have courage. And what I mean by courage is you are gonna be the person that has all this project data, and you're gonna be the person who has to synthesize and kind of make sense out of this data. And a lot of times, probably 60-70% of the times, you have to be the person that has to tell bad news.
Perfect. Welcome everyone to Vibrant Publishers podcast. Today we've got a fascinating guest, someone who bridges the gap between high pressure project management and inner peace. Tim Mills is a project management consultant with over 25 years of experience. Tim also shares his knowledge with future leaders teaching graduate level project management at Harvard University, Department of Continuing Education. But Tim's journey doesn't end there. He's also found a deep connection with Kundalini Yoga, becoming a level 2 instructor. So, Tim, welcome to the podcast, and we're excited to hear your experiences and how all of those come together.
Thank you, Naku. I appreciate it. That was a beautiful introduction, and I'm glad to be here. I look forward to answering any questions that you folks have.
Great. So let's start with project management and how you got started in it, and why do you find it interesting?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I was in the United States Air Force for over 27 years. So in the United States Air Force, my specialty was as a system acquisition person. So these are the people who work with companies to develop systems, buy airplanes, buy missiles, develop missiles, and being in that field, we had a very, very strict regulation on how to do project management. So it was very arduous. It takes like 10 to 15 years to learn all the different project management certifications that you have to do for the United States Department of Defense. So I just naturally was a project manager in that realm. And then when I left the Air Force, I became a consultant with KPMG and then also IBM Global Services, with my specialty obviously being in project management and more along the lines of developing and implementing project management offices. So that's a nutshell of my experiences. Now, what makes it fascinating and interesting for me is, of course, I might be one of those what they call a project management geek. I love everything about project management. But what makes it interesting is every industry that you work in will use some level of project management, right? We use project management in our day-to-day activities. We might not think about it, but some aspect of project management is done. And if you take at the people person side of the ability to give back to society, for example, if you do projects well, you're providing good outcomes for your company, good outcomes for nonprofits, etc. It's to provide excellence, an easy and effective way to provide excellence to these organizations. So it's very interesting. And when you're a project manager, you're always in the middle of everything that's going on. The eye of the storm is what we used to say.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So our main focus for today is project management in the VUCA environment. Tim, it would be great if you could give a brief about this topic and how this environment makes project management more challenging.
Yeah, easy. VUCA is an acronym. It actually came out of the military. It means, it's VUCA. V is for volatile. U is for uncertainty, C is complexity, and ambiguity. So this really, the idea is how to look at the environment, the project environment or your industry's environment, and to kind of understand the environment that's going to impact the project. So for example, volatility is being disturbed and interrupted because of rapid and lots of changes going on in the environment. What are some ways that you as a project manager can overcome volatility? That's important. The idea of uncertainty. I can't predict what's going on. I don't have a feel for what is going to change and how fast it's going to change. These are important for project managers to know. And complexity, we all know about complexity, especially probably the past 30 or 40 years. The idea of increases and changes in technology, the interrelationship of not only technology, but people and global project management, how projects are globalizing, kind of makes the projects obviously more complex because there's more things for us to think about. And probably my favorite of the acronym is ambiguity. So ambiguity is like, gee, I'm unclear what's going on here, or I don't really know what we're doing in this project, or I'm not sure. Maybe even the stakeholders don't understand what's going on. And ambiguity causes a lot of issues in communication with the stakeholders within a project and how to overcome. So understanding VUCA as an acronym is cool. And if you take a class, it's nice to understand the acronym. But it's more important to as a project manager is recognize that these environmental impacts, these changes are happening and will definitely impact your project. And more importantly, what are some effective, hopefully efficient, but mostly effective ways that we can counter some of these the VUCA environment. So that's kind of like the real focus of actually knowing VUCA is actually how do you develop specific reactions or effective reactions to help your project and help your company.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah.
My next question to you is if you could share with us some real world examples of how unexpected changes derail projects and how project management helps navigate those situations. And if you could give examples from your rich experience in the US Air Force.
Okay, yeah, for us, or as a consultant, I'll give you some
Yeah, sure.
probably a little bit more. So for an example, as I mentioned, VUCA is kind of like monitoring the environment, the rapidly changing of the environment. So, well, one project in particular is in the United States and I think throughout the world, changes in technology specifically for healthcare. And I work for a couple of healthcare organizations to introduce technology on how they provide care to the patients and how they manage finances, all the whole integration. So what some of the VUCA things that happen in that healthcare, that's a huge project, come along to two areas. One is the focus of shift, right, of healthcare because of regulations, at least in the United States, our federal and state regulations that provide new constraints to the project, right? And that's something that you really can't predict. But new regulations come down and say you now have to have technology that does A, B, and C. So that rapidly changes the project, and being able to change the technology, change the objectives of the project requires what we call in project management, at least I do, is that idea of nimbleness. How can you be quick to sense and respond? Can you sense what the issue is, what the change is, and then how you're going to respond? The second aspect of from the healthcare example that I'm giving you is the kind of change in focus from the provider, and the provider is the doctors, the nurses, the folks who are actually providing care, and really in some of the healthcare projects, the focus is now more on the information technology, right? So when you're talking about stakeholder management, right, where the doctor and nurse are obviously, in my opinion, they're the ones that should be running what's being done. A lot of times now it's like, well, the technology tells us that we have to do X, Y, and Z. So it's not only just the the machines, the new technology, introducing new technology. It's also how VUCA, the volatility and uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, how that can change the company, the industry itself, and how you as a project manager can manage that. So, for example, making sure that there's clarity on what we're doing, clarity in what is the objective of us implementing this brand new healthcare system, and understanding and making sure there's clarity among the folks who are going to do the, to be the providers of healthcare. Make sure that we are actually providing them with the tools and the processes that they need to actually do what's their strategic focus is, to help patients. And it's not always, well, that we're going to do technology for the sake of doing technology. Another way for us to help overcome the VUCA environment along the lines of communications, right? So how do we communicate amongst different stakeholders? How you communicate what the project is going to do and what you need from a doctor or nurse is very much different than how you're going to communicate to the IT person, right? You don't want to be an IT geek and talk to a nurse or a doctor because they don't understand what you're talking about. And on the flip side, talking to the technologists and just giving them high level, this is why we're doing it from a provider standpoint. There needs to be that common understanding. So bringing the two elements together is very important. So communication is very important. The ability to sense and respond changes, and the idea of changing in the regulatory environment is probably one of the biggest pushes throughout the world on in bringing in VUCA to any kind of project.
Also, well, thank you for sharing that. And my next question to you is, if you could share. So project management can be pretty stressful, and we are putting a special emphasis on VUCA. Now, if you could share how in your life yoga or meditation has helped you manage things better when it comes to managing projects which require a lot of focus, attention, and involve a lot of stress.
Beautiful. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because a lot of folks don't think, well, if you're a project manager, why are you doing yoga? You're wasting all that time.
Yeah,
And that's not true. So yoga for me, at least, provides me calm, right? So the ability to be calm, or to be able to slow down and kind of reflect, obviously to feel better physically, kind of clear your mind mentally, and have you focus. So for example, a type of yoga that I do, we do a lot of meditation, right? So the idea of why meditate, and why clear your mind? You as a project manager, two things: you're under a lot of stress, right? Because everything has to happen fast. A lot of people depend on you. So to have that clear mind allows you to hopefully be a better decision maker, and more importantly, helps me to become a better communicator, right? If you, as we all know, if you're constantly under stress, or the environment is pushing on you, a lot of times your ability to communicate effectively is reduced, right? So, for example, we all know project managers are bosses who scream and yell all the time, and that's probably not effective communication. So when I communicate as a project manager, I know a lot of people are looking at me, and coming to me for advice, and coming to me for clarity of communication. So I always have to strive to be, what is the best way for me to communicate to all my stakeholders? That includes my team, my sponsors, the customers, all stakeholders. And for me, that yoga allows me that like I mentioned before, the ability to be calm and reflective on how I talk, and how I manage and make decisions.
correct. That's wonderful to know.
Yeah.
And a lot of young audiences will be listening to this. Do you think they should wait for the stress to build up and then get into yoga and meditation, or it's just something that one should start from, say, a young age?
Yeah. Well, I'd definitely be an advocate to tell folks to start yoga at a young age, or and it could be in any kind of yoga, but um, the idea is you need to learn at a young age, especially what a young project manager, but to understand that stress is going to be a big part of the job, right? A lot of times young project managers, they like project management because, hey, this is great because when I come out of school, I can make a lot of money. If you're a good project manager, you make better money, a better starting salary. But there's a life work balance to that, right? The more money you make, the more complexity, the more stress that you have. So for you to be an effective project manager, or even more importantly, an effective leader, to have that ability to be calm, like I mentioned, in communication, but more importantly, calm in how you're making decisions. How do I look at data? How do I analyze that data? And how can I make well-reasoned decisions that not just based on my emotion or but based on the facts in a calm, collective way. And that's something that I also learned when I was in the military, United States Air Force. They make sure that you as a leader, that um, you might have a lot of pressure and stress on the inside, but you're presenting yourself as calm because you are affecting other folks as well. So yeah, I'd be a big proponent for folks to find whatever works for you. For me, yoga, meditation, bhakti, chanting, that works for me, and not for everybody. But find something, find that
Yeah,
out.
it could be in the form of music, it could be dance.
Yeah,
Find what's right for you.
perfect, perfect.
Good.
And
Now, as I mentioned, for our young audiences, if you could share some tools or some techniques that they can pick up to, say, start project management, or at this stage, because project management is not something that one can start straight out of college.
mhm.
So, if there are any tools or techniques that you feel that prepares them for project management in the future?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question because next week I start up another class over at Harvard, and the summer classes are only 7 weeks long, so they called intensive, right? So you meet 6 hours a week for 7 weeks. Um,
Correct.
but so there's a lot of stress. So a couple of things that I tell my younger students. First and foremost is courage. As a project manager, I can teach you all the tools, how to do a schedule, blah blah blah, how to do a budget, how to monitor and control, read metrics, right? But you have to have courage. And what I mean by courage is you are gonna be the person that has all this project data, and you're gonna be the person who has to synthesize and kind of make sense out of this data. And a lot of times, probably 60-70% of the times, you have to be the person that has to tell bad news, right? So bad news to the sponsor or to the senior manager that, hey, this project isn't going well because of X, Y, and Z, and this is what I think that we should do, right? So what I mean by courage is, a lot of times a younger project manager would come in and think, well, I will do whatever the boss tells me to do, right? And that's
Yeah.
probably true within reason. But if you're a project manager, you're the one that's overseeing that project. If things aren't going correctly, you're the one that needs to tell the sponsor. Um, the first day of my classes, I always ask this question to my students. I ask them, who is responsible for the success of a project, right? And then everyone raises their hand. They say, okay, Professor Tim, we know that one. That's the project manager. And I say, no, it isn't the project manager. It's the project sponsor, because that's the person who makes all the final decisions. So what does that mean for you as a project manager? I have to provide them the information. I have to provide them, are we on track? Are we off track? and I have to provide them with possible solutions because I'm working with my team, my trusted team, to come up with solutions. And if you don't have that courage to let the sponsor or the senior management know early that things are going bad, there's no time for them to effectively respond. That's usually the biggest issue that a young project manager does, is that fear of not speaking up to higher authority, so to speak. So I hope that helped. That was only one takeaway, but that, for me, that's probably the most important takeaway.
No, I think what they require is one thing to start off from, and a lot of options might confuse them. So it's great that this one key takeaway is something that they take from the podcast. So
Yeah, beautiful.
that's great. Now, one question that I like to ask guests uh, is that out of the two, between academics and industry, which role does Tim Mills prefer better, or like better, or enjoy better, whether it's Professor Tim Mills or the industry expert Tim Mills?
Um, that's a tough question, because they
Yeah,
all
usually that is the response I get.
because they all have different aspects. So for where I am in my career, right? I'm obviously at the tail end of my career, and I want to slow down. The idea of academics is when I'm teaching, right? So when I'm teaching, I love to reach out to the young folks, or folks who want to learn more about project management. I can share my experience, and that makes me feel good internally, right? To kind of hand that baton off to the next generation. uh, you know we're given as much advice as I possibly can of, when you step in this hole, this is what's going to happen. So don't don't try to avoid stepping in the hole. You will step in the hole. Just know what to do when that happens. But to be honest with you on your question, when you're in industry and doing a project that's focused on a specific objective, you are truly getting a sense that you're making a significant change, a strategic change to the organization. And you're actually seeing it, you're feeling it, you're working with the team to kind of get it done. So it's almost along the lines of, well, look at, like, so in the United States, football but is big, but so I'll use the idea of cricket, because cricket is huge. Over in India, because I know I have a lot of Indian students. They always tell me how cool cricket is. So if you ask an old cricket player, what would they like better, is would they rather coach or would they rather play, right? So I don't know what they would say. I know what Tim would say. Gee, sometimes I wish I could go back and I could play again, right? So I hope that answered your question. So it's a balance issue, but I do miss making that strategic difference and change for the organization.
Got it. Well, thank you for answering that, and sorry for asking that.
No, that's perfect. I think that's a great question. That's an excellent question.
Right. Thank you. Now, getting back to the topic of project management,
Yep.
what are some misconceptions about project management? Because it could feel very intimidating with all the jargons going around, and for
Yeah.
young adults, what do you think?
Yeah. So some of the misconceptions are, with people's perception of project management. So, for example, one of the big current misconceptions is, um, only men do project managers, right? And that was probably true over the past 40 or 50 years. But misconception, there's a lot more women coming into project management. I think some of the statistics I see is that there's been like an 8 to 10% rise in women over the past 5 to 10 years getting into project management. Now they represent, at least in the United States. I can talk about United States statistics. They represent like 35 to 40% of project managers. So that's a misconception. Another misconception is, well, you got to be a technical person to be a project manager, right? And most folks think, well, you know, she was a software engineer and she wrote software, so it makes sense that she's now the project manager. Not necessarily true. The biggest, from my experience, the biggest effectiveness in project management is your ability to communicate in those people skills, right? To be a leader, to help other folks. You got to remember, the project manager is not the one doing the project, right? You have the team members who are actually doing the project. So how do you provide leadership for them? How do you provide the wherewithal or the protection to reduce barriers, for example, like a scrum master would do? So that people person, that communication is absolutely required. So I hope those two help you.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, what my next question to you is, let's say a young listener right now wants to launch a side hustle, or
Mhm.
maybe as simple as planning a big trip. How can they apply the basics of project management principles to achieve their goals?
Yeah. Excellent question. So a lot of times we'll think project manager. So what I need to do is I need to get a really cool software tool. I can do all this great stuff, right? So I can make schedules and I can make budgets and all that neat stuff. Eventually, you'll get there, right? So if you're doing a side hustle or you're a young project manager, the very first thing is the idea of strategic intent, right? Why am I doing this? What are we doing? Just even to get down to like one sentence, not like a whole laundry list. These are the 15 deliverables that we're going to do. Why am I doing this? And what are we going to do? So once again, I use my classroom. On the very first day of my class, I always tell folks about within industry, the strategic management process, right? And they roll their eyes and they say, "Ah, Tim, I thought this was going to be a cool project management class, but you're talking about business strategy." Well, there's two parts of business, classical business strategy, right? And that's the first part is what they call strategic formulation, right? Which is the idea of what's our mission, our objectives, our vision, all that. People like to do that because that's kind of fun. The second part is strategic implementation. And if you really think about it, strategic implementation is just another word for identifying all the projects that we're going to do and making sure that those projects are done well. So if you're a young person, understand that strategy, if you're in a startup, that strategy is the most important thing that you can start at. What are we doing and why are we doing it? Everything else that'll become your baseline, your foundation, so to speak, of anything that comes in that changes. Hey, we should add this, we should take this away, and people have thousands of ideas and they want to move you in a different direction. This is what we said we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. And if you keep that steady course, most time you're going to be successful more so than not.
Correct.
Good.
Now, looking ahead, what do you think are some exciting trends or developments that you see in project management, especially for the young generation?
Yeah. So young generation. So once again, technology has been so cute, so cool, and it's been happening so rapidly. So we can obviously say so the idea of integrating AI, artificial intelligence, and even machine learning is relatively new, but it's happening very quickly into project management. So, well, how does AI help in project management? Well, first of all, AI and the integration of AI into project management helps us to understand what a routine task, how to automate routine tasks so we can do projects faster, hopefully. The idea of artificial intelligence and melding of all the past data on past projects allows for more simulations. There's a lot more simulations that are going on in project management. I know in the military, we always use some simulations to have different scenarios, and it shows you what are the different what are the potential risks, and then that helps you to devise risk mitigation strategies. So, but simulation project management is happening very quickly. It allows for the project manager to need to be smart on how to read data, how to use data, how to be a better project risk manager by using these that too, the AI and integration. Another big trend, as I mentioned before, is data analytics, right? So beautiful. We're getting all this data, big buckets and buckets of data. But you, as a young project manager, you probably used to, and you have to be used to getting all this data. But what do you do with the data? That's more important than getting the data, right? And how do you communicate that data? I always tell my project managers, we use data, and the more data we have, the more that we have to filter. But the whole idea of using data is for us to tell a story, right? Very rarely a good project manager would just give numbers to the project team or to the project sponsor, for example, right? Because that kind of makes them boring, and numbers can be boring. But if you tell a story, right, there's a difference when you're telling a project sponsor that these 7 tasks are 40% done when they should have been 55% done, and and I'll give you a better update next week. Well, you gave them good information, but you didn't tell them a story, right? So what? What's the so what? And we're 45%. So is that going to impact the deliverable? Or what do I need from you, project sponsor? So learning how to use data, understand that that's a huge change. And then I think at least over the past 6 or 7 years, one of the big changes is the whole idea of sustainability and social responsibility, being part of a project, right? To actually think of those as deliverables and as environmental impacts that a project manager and the project team must be thinking about. So those are probably the biggest innovations or trends, and I think they're all positive, right? It makes it hard for a younger project manager to make sure that now they have to learn all that stuff as well. So
Do you think that's overwhelming for
yeah,
them?
it could be, but a lot of times, so I look at like a younger project manager who might have is already used to collecting data or working on software applications and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's tough for me to say, but it is true. The younger project managers, the new project managers, students that are coming out of college are way smarter than I was at their age. And that's okay. They have more stuff that they have to leverage and learn, but they have more to offer as well. So it's a beautiful horizon and future for project management, I believe.
Got it. And what are your views on using AI in project management?
Well, can you repeat that again? So what?
Yeah, I was asking what are your views on AI or specifically Chat GPT or Gemini using such tools in project management?
Yeah, I think so once again, I always go to the adage, you, the project manager, are driving the ship, right? So be thoughtful, be once again, go back to the reason. A lot of times, what I'm getting at is a lot of times you don't want to be chasing technology for technology's sake, right? Is this specific tool going to help me, my organization, how my organization does projects? What is the environment of my organization, right? So this is kind of like the same thing that happened maybe about 15, 20 years ago when the introduction of the Agile methodology, right? So yes, for specific industries and specific project characteristics, Agile makes sense, right? But just, and I have seen, as a consultant, I have seen organizations just say, well, everyone's doing Agile, so I'm doing Agile. And then, well, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it on your project? You have relatively simple project. You don't have a product development, so you don't need to be that close to the customer. Why are you doing Agile? Well, because everyone else is doing Agile. Okay. Well, once again, I see the same thing with AI. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be cool. But how are you going to use it? How is your industry going to use it? How is it going to make us provide better projects, more effective projects. Are we basically still on time, on budget? Do we meet the customer's requirements? So yeah, by all means, become smart, become well versed in AI and all those different tools. But if you've been around long enough, like myself, I think AI is going to be fantastic. But I think over I'd just say the next 2 years, there's going to be 50 different applications, and within 5 years, 45 of those will go away. Okay, so which one are you going to choose?
Got it. That's an amazing answer, and it leaves the audience with some introspection to be done,
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
whether to go ahead and use all the text possible, or you know use something as simple as a pen and a notebook, and still it all depends on how you are managing the project.
Yeah, absolutely. If if I mentioned before that the idea of project risk management is good. It's going to be a revolution in how we do risk management with AI. Because we can do simulations, we have better predictions, we can integrate data from a lot of different past projects, et cetera, et cetera. And that's going to be very cool. But when you get all that data and you get all these ideas, but you still don't know how to do project risk management well, are you any better off, right? Um,
Correct.
so
Correct. Well, you're right. You're right. Yeah, and I think don't get overwhelmed is what with all these new tech is what the audience should think about.
hmm.
Well, my next question, and my last question to you is, if you could help the audience, people just starting out in their career, with a roadmap to project management, and how can one get into this field starting
Yeah,
out?
yeah. So project management as a field has changed very much over the past 45 years, right? Um, in the past, project managers were, like I mentioned, were people that came out of the technical side of the world, and then hey, you know what you're doing, so you become a project. So project management now is considered more of a profession, right? So
Yeah.
the whole idea of course, I would say this is make sure you have a good balance of getting educated. How to do basic project management, how to do um, um, agile project management, and then also how to do hybrid project management. The mixture of the two is very, very important. That education, but nothing beats experience. So it's education and experience is very much. So I tell my students, and this is just Tim's perspective, if if you're a young student, it might be better for you if you want to get into project management that you work in a specific industry and do maybe a lot of work, a couple of years of work as a business analyst first, right? And why you want to do that is because as a business analyst, you're getting deeper into the processes. You're understanding how the industry works. What are the important processes, and then as you grow, maybe I'd say by 2 or 3 years is pretty good as a business analyst, and you learn all those techniques for how to identify requirements, how to coordinate and facilitate, and then that makes that, in my opinion, makes you a better project manager, a junior project manager, right? Because ideally, if you're in a good company, um, having that baseline understanding and allowing you to work on smaller projects before you move on to larger projects. A lot of times, students, what they need to understand is, well, Tim, I went to school and I got my MBA and I got a master's degree in project management, and then 2 weeks later I took the Project Management Institute PMP exam, and I got my PMP exam. Right? I said that's fantastic and that's outstanding, right? Well, you're gonna show up at day one of your job, and they're gonna say, "Oh my God, look, she's got a master's degree and she's got a PMP. Let's give her the brand new enterprise integration project," right? It's like, I have no idea what's going on, right? I don't know what's going on. I don't know who the players are. I don't understand the culture of the industry. Blah blah blah. All those type of things. The worst thing you want to do is the very first project that you are given, you fail in that project. Okay, so kind of take those incremental steps, right? There's so many changes in project management. You got to stay abreast. You got to make sure you stay current on how to do that. And as I always tell my younger students, the most important thing about project management is communication. Learn to be a good communicator. How to tell a story, how to ask the right questions when you communicate with a sponsor, how to ask him or her for how they're going to help you do the project. The same thing with your team. Let them know bad news, how you're going to communicate effectively, etc. And then the other thing is on metrics, right? As I already mentioned this before, metrics are important for monitoring and controlling a project, but having the ability to actually effectively tell a story. The so what. Learn how to talk in the so what. As I mentioned before, we're off schedule by 30%. So what? What does that mean? In some projects that's not a big deal. So why bother telling people? In some projects it can be, well, that means that our time to market is going to be delayed by 6 months. Well, that's what the sponsor really wanted to hear, right? Because now their job is is affected. So learn the communication, learn how to be an effective communicator. Those are probably the three biggest things that I can give a junior project manager insights on.
Where you mentioned a fair amount of fair year, say 2 to 3 years of experience in business analysis. So would you say data or reading and analyzing data is another important point that a project manager needs?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. As we mentioned before, so when we talked about the trends, the whole idea of data analysis, all what we used to call big data. I think we might still call it big data, and that's great. But how do you synthesize that data? How do you do that data analysis? And once again, that metrics is like what I'll go to. Like again, you as a project manager are the person who has to do the so what, right? So are we collecting a lot of information for the sake of collecting information? Or do we know that we're collecting the right information? How do you know that you're collecting the right information unless you really have some good insights into what is the important processes and outcomes of that specific organization, right? So like in healthcare, I just use this as an example. I can have all the information in the world that says, well, on average we have 600 patients coming through the door every hour, right? And that's a beautiful statistics. And you have graphs and say 600, and on Tuesdays it's 500, and all that type of stuff. Okay, hold back. Well, so what? Do we know what's wrong with these people? Which ones are we helping? Which ones are we not helping? Well, how can we? What is that? What is the relevancy of that data, and how am I going to communicate that data? So.
Understood. Well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing your insights on the world of project management, as well as explaining to the young audience about yoga, the importance of yoga and meditation as well.
Beautiful.
Love the conversation and hoping to speak to you again. I'm sure the audience also loved this episode. And yeah, once again, thank you so much, Tim,
You're more
for
than
joining.
welcome. Thank you, Nicole, for the opportunity to speak with you today.
All right. All right. See you, Tim. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.